Hi everyone, I'm Anita Zelme from EUFRAS. Thank you for coming to this month's coffee break. Today we are having an event together with Project ClimateSmartAdvisors. As we work in our advisory work, in the last years we really often are wondering, okay, we have climate problems, how do we solve them? How do we as advisors can help it, and how can we be in front of all the processes to teach and consult our farmers the best? So here comes the Climate Smart Advisors project, and today we will talk about the approach that project has, the possibilities that everyone also not involved in the project can be a part of the information created in the project and can participate in the activities. So today we have 4 speakers, which is Elise de Bruin from Belgium, from ILVO, which is the project coordinator of the Climate Smart Advisors. Then Laura Triste from Belgium, from ILVO as well. Kevin Collins from the Open University in UK, and Annelie Bernhardt, from FUAC, Germany, who will share the experiences being advisor in the project. So thank you. Let's enjoy and the event. And as always, when you're not speaking, please turn off your microphones. Regarding the questions, please do not hesitate to ask questions you have. Not to forget them, you can put them in the chat and they will be asked afterwards. And also after each presentation, there will be a slot for you to ask any questions you have. So please.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much, Anita, for the introduction. So I am Elise de Bruin. As Anita indicated, I'm coordinator for the Climate Smart Advisors project, which is entitled in full, Connecting and Mobilizing the EU Advisory Community to Support the Transition to Climate Smart Farming. So I will start with a brief introduction just to set the scene a little bit and help your understanding of what is then presented next. So the project, in some very simple numbers, we have a large project, a large group with partners in 27 European countries. We have around 75 partner organizations involved in our consortium, and we started about 2.5 years ago. So we started in April 2023, and this is a 7-year project, so we will be active until the end of March 2030. Our objective, it's a long objective, so I'll say it in full and then I'll break it down in some smaller parts. So our overall objective is to mobilize the European agricultural advisory community, leading to an acceleration of the adoption of climate smart farming practices by the wider farming community within and across European agricultural knowledge and innovation systems. We will do this by boosting the role of agricultural advisory services by strengthening their capacity and providing targeted advice, and that's quite key and central in our project, and also by implementing the approaches and sharing the solutions developed in our sister projects, Climate Farm Demo and Climate Smart Research on a wider scale. So as said, this is quite a mouthful, but I will explain a little bit more some of the highlights as we see them. So when we talk about the European advisory community, how do we plan to do this? How do we plan to mobilize this? Mostly through our consortium. As indicated, we have a large consortium. We have 75 partner organizations, and the majority of them, more than 2/3 of them, are advisory organizations. So we have a nice representation of European advisory organizations within our consortium. They're also quite diverse, so we have different types of advisory organizations, going from public to private to NGO and non-profits, and they provide advisory services for basically all agricultural sectors. So we have all sectors represented within our consortium. We also want to accelerate the adoption of climate smart practices. And I want to clarify that when we talk about climate smart practices is that we're talking both about adaptation and mitigation. So the overall goal is to build sustainable agricultural systems, which are both low in carbon, so which mitigate and try to reduce carbon footprint as much as possible, but which are also resilient, and so which are adapted to already existing effects of climate change on agriculture. So we don't choose one or the other. It also means that we're talking about a very diverse set of climate smart practices, and the impacts of climate change are very different, and the effects of climate change are very different across Europe. So we cannot really choose. So we have to talk about a lot of different practices, and to structure this or to enable exchange on this very diverse set of practices, we work with 12 thematic areas. So they are listed here. They go from water management to agroforestry to grassland management, so very diverse. And each of these thematic areas has a thematic leader in a position, and he or she is there to support knowledge exchange on practices within their thematic area. Okay, I said this was the third point. So strengthening advisor capacity and providing targeted advice. But what does it mean? It's very central in our project, but what does it mean? And to understand this, it is, I think, important to understand that climate change is to be seen as a wicked problem. It is considered as a wicked problem. And what does it mean? What does that mean? Wicked problems are problems with quite specific properties. They are inherently very complex. There are also existing knowledge gaps, so not everything is known about this. There is a lot of uncertainty. It is also a lot to do with opinions and values and beliefs, so there are not clear solutions at hand, and that's very much the case for climate change. But for these wicked problems, there are also specific ways of looking for solutions. And some key concepts there is concepts such as systems thinking, so trying to look at the complete pictures and not individual elements, trying to get different views incorporated in your process. So the concept of co-creation is very important. So it is important to understand this because it also means that when we talk about capacity for advisors, that it's not only that we're not looking only at technical capacity. Of course, it is important to know about relevant mitigation and adaptation practices and to learn about regenerative and precision farming, but it's just as much about methodological capacity to enable and support cooperation and to help the systems thinking. So we are also looking at this methodological capacity, systems thinking, group facilitation, etc. So we are looking at both these aspects when we talk about capacity. And how do we do this? Mostly through active networks. And I added the active because it's different activities which shape these networks within our project. So if we look at our project, we have different levels of sub-networks, if you like. And the one here is the Communities of Practice network is actually the most important. And Laura will talk much more about this, and also Annelie and Kevin, so I'll be very brief. It's important to know that these are mostly local or regional networks, small groups of advisors working together on a specific topic. So that's one level of the network. These are then connected at the national level. So we have 27 national climate smart farming networks where these advisors from the communities of practice also connect to farmers, researchers, people from policy, or any other relevant climate actor within their country. So there are activities there which are facilitated by a national coordinator in each country. There is also the thematic leaders network, which I already mentioned. So the 12 thematic areas where we have the thematic leaders facilitating exchange mostly at the international level. And we also make connections, of course, beyond our consortium. So we try to connect to other projects, most notably our sister projects, Climate Farm Demo and Climate Smart Research. But also we connect to other flagship initiatives, policymakers, and of course, other projects. And I said activities. So our core activities across these networks are peer-to-peer exchange, but also multi-actor knowledge exchange. So connecting between all relevant actors and also some trainings. So to conclude the introduction, I want to talk a little bit about what is then the added value for advisors, all advisors provided by our network. As we will explain in a bit more detail, it should be clear that we provide capacity building through extensive peer-to-peer exchange for a lot of advisors across the EU, and that we provide opportunities for connecting to a network of not only advisors, but also farmers, colleague advisors, and other local actors through our network. And those opportunities are open for everyone, more or less. We will also provide opportunities or training for all European advisors and trainees, both live trainings, but also a lot of online trainings. And so we'll talk a little bit about that later on as well. And we will build a repository, or we have already built a repository, and I will show that later as well. So there is a repository with advisory methods that will be expanded also with information about farming practices, including user testimonies. So we think that is also an important added value for advisors provided. So that was it in terms of introduction. So I would like to pass the floor to Laura for more information on the Communities of Practice Network, unless there are urgent questions at this point.
Okay, no questions for Lies? Okay, then I will continue. Okay, hi, I'm Laura Tusta. I'm a close colleague of Lies, and within the project, I have the role as Work Package 1 leader, and Work Package 1 is mainly involved with the networking and knowledge exchange. And I would like to introduce to you or explain to you what the role or why we chose communities of practice as our main instrument of our capacity development in the project. Yes, Lies, you can go to the next slide. We, as explained by Lies, climate change, and you already know, climate change has a very different impact in very different regions in Europe. And you have probably already seen this picture here, where you see that there are very different impacts also for the farmers in these different regions in Europe. So farmers experience this in a very different way. Yes, Lies, you can go to the next slide. And of course, advisors, you as advisors have a very important role in this. You are the trusted messengers who can help translate this climate data, climate information, and experiences that farmers have into practical on-farm action through providing climate smart advice. But yeah, climate smart advice, what is this then? Yes, you can go to the next slide. So climate smart advice, we use that as a concept in the project, but if you see it in the view of these very different regions in Europe, it can mean very different things in very different regions. So what does it then mean in your practice as an advisor? Yes, go to the next slide. And to translate this to this advisory practice, you have to give some meaning to this concept, climate smart advice. What does it mean in our context, in our region, with our farmers, within our sector? And so it's important to make it contextual. And this you can do through experimenting, sharing with peers. You already know a lot, and to learn together. And this is where the peer-to-peer learning between advisors come in. And this is the instrument that we are using to build this capacity to learn together on what climate smart advice can mean in your region. Yes. So we have developed in Work Package 4 an overview of required competences for climate smart advisors. And it can be distributed amongst knowledge. You need the right knowledge and awareness of what climate smart farming is. So you need an understanding of the key climate change concepts, the knowledge of the effects of climate change, have some familiarity with adaptation and mitigation measures on farms. also understand sustainable development principles, and also understand policy and regulations related to climate change and climate action. Then you also, of course, need the right attitude towards climate action. You need to be dedicated to support farmers in climate smart farming, also be committed to learn, because as Lies told, we don't know everything yet about climate change. So it's this wicked problem, and we need to learn constantly and stay up to date with new insights. Also be enthusiastic about promoting the transition to climate smart farming. And then, of course, you need the right skills. These also mentioned, so not only technical skills, but also the social skills. How can I communicate with farmers who are often quite skeptic towards climate action or climate change? Yeah, so this whole set of competences, this is where we would like to work on. And it's a whole bunch, and obviously you cannot know everything, but this is the competences that we see for you as a climate smart advisor. Yes, Lies? So we use within the project the communities of practice to facilitate the peer-to-peer learning on these competences that I explained before. And in theory, communities of practice are defined as a group of people who share a concern or a passion for something they do, and who like to learn together and do it better while interacting. So how do we then translate it to climate smart advisors? In climate smart advisor, we define it as a group of advisors who share a common concern or a set of problems or an interest in a topic. The aim is that they share best practices, but also create new knowledge by collaborating, by exchanging, by experiencing, experimenting. And it's led by a climate smart coach who is trained in managing such a COP, and a minimum of 5 additional advisors. They receive funding from the project for 2 years, and they can choose how they use this funding, either to remunerate the participation of the advisors in the meeting, or to hire a bus or hire an expert, or so they are free to use this budget in the way they want. Yes, go to the next slide, please. So communities of practice can be defined by the domain, so the overall theme of the community of practice, the practice itself, which is then explained by the body of knowledge and the methods and the tools that they together develop. And then, of course, the community itself, so the relationships built between the members of the community of practice. Yes? And within the project, we have a very high-level bottom-up approach. So the communities of practice are free to choose the theme and the objective of their community of practice, because of this diversity in Europe, there are very different needs and how advisors need to build their capacity. And as long as it's related to climate smart advice or climate smart farming, they are free to choose their theme and objectives. They can also choose how they set up their activities within their community of practice. The only requirement is that they meet regularly, which is 8 times in 2 years. They can also choose to include other actors from outside the community of practice or not, also based on what their theme or objective is. And they can, as mentioned, choose how they use their budget. Yes. So here you see some pictures of COP activities. You see that the locations where they are very different. So some are meeting in the field, some are meeting in a meeting room, some are meeting at home, at a farmer's home. So here you see the diversity and types of activities that they set up. Yes, go to the next slide. So here you have an overview of what we ask in the communities of practice. So you have, of course, which is core, the peer-to-peer exchanges during meetings. And these are often practice-driven learning through farm visits or participation in demonstration, very hands-on workshops or case studies. And they can collaborate also with other projects and initiatives by organizing joint meetings and exchange also outside their community of practice. Then there's also 2 community of practice training events. with one designated trainer. And then it's also about capacity building, but it's maybe a bit more one-way direction than the peer-to-peer exchanges. So there's a very specific training objective and also an evaluation of the learning afterwards. Then we also ask communities of practice to test advisory tools and methods. These already refer to the repository of advisory tools and methods that we are building. So the aim is that the communities of practice contribute to building this repository by testing tools and methods themselves and adding tools and methods to these repositories. And then we also ask them to evaluate their progress towards meeting their objectives. So each year we ask them to evaluate where are we in reaching our objectives and do we need to adapt our plans or maybe our objective. Yes. So now 40 COPs have started. They are almost nearing the end of their first COP, period. So we see that there's a very big diversity in the communities of practice. So some are very specific objectives, for example, reducing methane emissions for cattle, and some are very general, for example, enabling farm advisors with the skills and confidence to deliver climate smart advice. So you see a very big difference in how they envision building their community of practice. Some have an objective, a very tangible outcome, for example, like a cheat sheet for advisors. Others have more intangible outcomes like developing skills, which is more vague and not so easy to grasp. Then I already told you there's a very diverse set of the ways that the activities are given shape. So some included role playing, some jointly tested some tools. There's training from experts, visiting a farm demo together, but also looking at one case together and discussing maybe a climate assessment results from one farm. And then you also have the communities who are very diverse. In some countries or some COPs, the advisors come all from the same country, and in some there's a diversity of companies involved in the community of practice. Yes. You can find all the communities of practice online. So on our website, you can find the overview of the communities of practice. You can find also who is the coach, which country they are from, to which COP team, which thematic area they are linked to. So you can search on thematic area and then find all the COPs that are working on that. So please, I invite you to visit this website. Yes, and then my final slide. So by the end of the project, we want to have 260 communities of practice. And depending on the country and the emission of the countries, there will be different numbers. So low emission countries will have 5 communities of practice, medium emission countries 10, and high emission countries 22. If you are interested to join, because those communities of practice can also be open to advisors who are not a partner in the project, you can contact your national coordinator to see whether there is a community of practice planned within your region. And you can find the national coordinators also on the website. And then now I give the floor to more practical insights from Annelie and a video.
Okay. Thank you, Laura. I don't know, Anita, if there are questions.
No, there are no questions right now, but to be honest, I had some questions in line, but then in the last slides, Laura answered all of them. And maybe just one then from my side. Okay, if I'm interested in thematics that are not in my country, can I reach out also to other countries? Will I be welcome or?
I think for participating in the community of practice, it's probably more difficult, but you can reach out to the thematic leaders who organize some regular events online on these thematic areas. But Lise will also come back to it. So we will share a survey where you can subscribe to the newsletter and you will be informed about these thematic area meetings that are organized.
Yeah, perfect, thank you. Okay, let's go for a video, I guess then.
Okay. So as Laura indicated, we want to also put a bit our existing climate smart coaches in the spotlight. So we have Annelie here, but before we do that, I also want to share a short video with you. So bear with me for a second. I hope this works without difficulties.
So one thing that the advisors struggle with at first is the translation of scientific research into farmers' language. And we've seen that in our COP, particularly with methane-reducing feed additives. We've had to bring in researchers to tell us exactly how they work. And then as a group, we come up with the ways that we feel advisors can discuss those with farmers. So it's about simplifying the language and making sure it's understandable.
So one of the issues that advisors have is how to give good advice on cover crops, because cover crops can be quite broad. There are solutions for diseases, for improving the soil health, or for all different kind of issues. And the specific kind of cover crops helps to improve a specific issue. So there's quite a large amount of cover crops you can choose from. So one of the issues of the advisors would to be better in is getting more knowledge on the cover crops.
In our context, people are used to being told what they should do in their daily work. They're very maybe demand driven by maybe also a bit of hierarchies, which is not negative, but we have hierarchies in our institution. And this project enables them to think freely, and to think outside the box and to think also of their skills and how they could apply them to CSA. And it was a bit abstract for them in the beginning, but then they broke free and now they create their own ideas. The most important skill that we help advisors build through the project is probably the soft skills that it takes to deal with topics surrounding climate. It's not an easy thing to have to discuss with farmers, so to be able to sit down as a group and come up with the different strategies that we can use to discuss with farmers is really important.
We are trying to improve the knowledge of the advisors due to different kind of activities we have in the community of practice meetings. So for example, we go to a farmer and learn from the farmer what they are doing within their choice of the cover crop. But also we work closely together with Wageningen University. They have experts on cover crops and they give lectures for the advisors to get more knowledge and also hand out tools they can use when providing advice to the farmers.
I think as a climate smart coach, I supported the group of advisors in my COP to communicate a bit better with each other, because I saw in the beginning they have a lot of technical skill and everyone in their own way has expertise, but they would not always talk to each other. But now they do, and they meet also independently from my presence, which I'm very happy about, and then they report back to me. So I enable trust in the group among them and with me.
Okay, so that was some coaches, but we also have one present here today. So over to Annelie, I would say.
Hello, that was interesting to see the video. It was for me the first time. It's nice to look back, and there was a good general assembly and being with everyone with such a group. It's nice to meet in person. So thank you for having me today, for being here. It's very nice to be part of the EUFRAS Coffee and to be with my colleagues. I'll try to share in 7 minutes. I have, I think, right, a bit about our dairy COP in Bavaria. So as the first slide says, we are focusing on dairy farming in Bavaria. And I don't think I need to introduce FUAG. I think the group here knows about the State Academy for Leadership building in Bavaria in food and agriculture. So this is me in the Bavarian countryside, where we have a lot of dairy farming in this area. And so just to say something about a coach, because sometimes people ask me also, do you have to be specifically skilled in your thematic area? Of course, you have to have knowledge, but you don't have to be the expert, in this case, in dairy farming. But of course, what helps is to have a broad field of work experience and also studies in agriculture and food, which is my case. I've worked in different countries around the world in many different institutions. And that helps to understand the social dynamics and institutional specificities also, because in my COP, we have advisors from both public and private sector. So to have them work well together, I think this helps. And appreciating the skills and the competencies of each advisor, so you can really value them and make them feel comfortable in the group and to share their knowledge with each other. So my role is really more in a coordination and bring the knowledge that comes together in a period of 2 years to coordinate that and bring it into like concrete activities and outcomes. Next slide. So in our first meeting, we set the objectives, which are 3. They are from both broad, like Laurie was sharing, it can be very broad and it can be very specific. For us, we started broad in this COP. We said we want to start facilitating a dialogue on climate change built on trust and mutual understanding of climate issues among farmers and advisors, because we knew that it's not a topic that's being discussed openly a lot in our area. So we wanted to start small. And then bringing knowledge systems together through farm visits and emission calculations with subsequent discussion. So the emission calculating was a very concrete activity for us, and to discuss data. And distributing targeted, technically sound information on the topic of climate-friendly dairy farming by writing articles and using sustainable media. Next slide. And I want to highlight within our activities, because Laurie mentioned also the importance of our training events that are obligatory and that are quite set in what that we have to evaluate them, and a new set of knowledge has to come to the advisors from an outside expert. So our objective here was understanding how to navigate through an emission calculator with advisors, because our scientific partner institution has developed this technical tool, and it's very complex to understand, and it can also lead to wrong assumptions if you just calculate and you have numbers of a farmer, and then he also feels like, okay, you're taking my numbers, my data, and what does it mean? So for us, it was very interesting experience to have the opportunity of such a training event through the COP. And just quickly to say, it was important to have 2 meetings, to first have the data, to obtain it together with the farmer, also a farmer advisor and a scientist, and then suggest changes a farmer can make on the farm, in this case, for example, in the fodder. And then we met again a couple of months later to see what changes have happened. And it was very nice because you could see that reducing emissions can also mean reducing cost of his feeding material. So we had a very nice journey from being maybe also skeptical of all this data obtaining and climate issues to being part of the process of transformation. Next slide. Here are some pictures. For instance, on the left, this is our COP with the advisors and showing everyone how this tool works on the computer. And we had snacks provided by the farmer, and we were, actually, it was a very nice ambience. And also seeing his farm, his cows. Yeah. Last is we tested as a methodology the farmer's journey by our French partners that was provided by IDEL. And so we went through this methodology where there are different steps that can happen in a COP, and we had to order them chronologically, or say what comes first. And you can't see very well, but it's about starting to discuss, and then when you fail, you try again. So just to say here, we visually depicted our journey of a COP. I don't have time to go through all the steps, but what is important is the next slide, is what I thought was very nice, is that we used the methodologies given by the French partners, but spontaneously what happened was a discussion within the COP. When there's a challenge in the farmer's journey, what do we need to communicate, and how do we need to communicate it? And this is a method now that we have brought to advisors in a broader scale within Bavaria, and we could also present it to other COPs in Europe. And we can share this afterwards. I don't have time to read it out all now, but maybe the center is that we should be open-minded, professional, and respectful with each other within the COP, but also from farmer to advisors. And this is not to say a COP is perfect and a silver bullet solution. I mean, this all sounds like so brilliant, and it is very nice and inspiring. But of course, challenges continue to always be also non-competitive, maybe. I mean, that's also always something that is there among advisors and in the field of agricultural development. I mean, we know it, but I think we did well, and we continue to enjoy being a COP. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Annelie.
Yeah, looks like we don't have any questions for Annelie now, but feel free to raise your hand and ask if you have some. Annelie said that she won't read out all the things, but as you know, EUFRAS Coffee Break events are always recorded, so you will be able to go back and look at it if you want to and need to and are interested in. I just have one question, Annelie. Do you see these COPs and this approach continuing also after the project, and how do farmers and advisors react to that approach?
Yeah, it's a good question, an important question, Anita, because now coming towards the end of this first COP, it's of course something that keeps, we're busy organizing the last COP meeting right now, but and as part of that, we want to invite decision makers, and we want to make clear recommendations how we think this COP should continue, because they like the format, and especially one of the advisors, she's very very engaged, very motivated, and she would like to continue it. We just have to see if we can get funding for it, and it has to be formalized, because I don't know if people would do it on a voluntary basis. But this activity with the emission tool, that continues. For instance, yesterday we had also a meeting with more than 100 advisors from Bavaria, and to learn about the tool and also learn better how to interpret the data, and that also continues. So we've integrated part of the learnings of the COP into our regular seminar program within FUAG. So maybe that's also something to highlight.
Thank you.
Thanks.
It's nice. Okay. Kevin, maybe you can continue then.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much. So my name's Kevin Collins. I'm from the Open University in the UK. And I'm part of the team, Work Package 4, who's been looking at how we can monitor, evaluate, and learn from all of the activities across the network, but specifically also on the COPs, the communities of practice. So I'm going to give a short presentation on some of our initial findings and some of our approach. So next slide, please. So monitoring and evaluation and learning, these are just some reference for people to view later, but essentially we're observing, we're documenting, we're assessing, but also key element of our project is we're trying to learn. So we're understanding ourselves as a learning project, as a learning process, and that's why we have an explicit commitment to learning as part of our monitoring, evaluation and learning process. So we have our central focus is on this question: how do we strengthen, mobilize advisors, community to support climate smart agriculture? So there's one element is focusing on the network across the whole of the project. And then, as I said, we're also about focusing on lessons about specific ways in which we can boost the role of advice and advisors. And so we're documenting a whole set of activities and processes within the project so that we function as a learning system across the whole project. And then we're also doing monitoring, evaluation, and learning in COPs specifically. And that focus on COPs is really to report on the progress of the COPs, the capacity development within the COPs, and then also learning and exchange in the COPs, but also between the COPs as we develop across the different waves that COPs will have in the project. Next slide, thanks. So we have a range of instruments that we're using, and I'm not going to go into the detail of these, but I'll just briefly explain a little bit about them in a moment. But we have ways of which we are evaluating the COPs, what they're doing, and that's an annual evaluation. We also have a way of determining sort of existing capacity of advisors, and also we have a dynamic learning agenda. And that's a sort of a repository of a whole range of questions and answers that we are developing in the project that are being submitted by anybody in the project, advisors as well as academic researchers. And the whole process around the capacity assessment tool is really to understand what the advisor's current capacity and changes in capacity around knowledge, their skills, their advisory practices, the barriers that they experience in whatever format they arise. And then that leads to an understanding of the training needs advisors, which we can build into other parts of the project and provide that training in part through improving the skills of advisors, but then also they can identify training needs which they may need to address outside the project. I mentioned the dynamic learning agenda. This is a kind of a large web-based tool where we are basically taking a range of questions and answers that we're developing through the COP activities, focusing on capacity development, advisory practice, but also farming practice. And it's the relationship between all of those three things which give rise to a whole body of learning and insight around how do we mobilize and strengthen the advisory community. So this is an evolving agenda. It's very much, we're not just trying to do the end of the project, it's very much at the beginning and throughout the project, so that we are developing our insights, but also then responding to those in the way that we do COPs or also other activities within the whole project. And just to give you a flavor, and I apologize for this slightly small, here are some of the kinds of headline questions, and underneath each of these there are many other questions. So for example, how do you motivate farmers for climate smart farming? This is a real key question. How do we deal with challenging engagement of either other advisors or also farmers? And how do we support better knowledge exchange and learning? Exactly the kind of thing that Annalie was talking about a few moments ago in the practical elements of this. And so the people in the network and other advisors are able to contribute answers about how they've approached these kinds of questions and others, and what they've found to be good practice, and also what hasn't worked, so we can learn from that as well. In so doing, the DLA, the learning agenda, is actually revealing a number of issues around the challenges that we're finding about how you do climate smart advice, how advisors can engage that. So, for example, we're seeing problems around how do you spark and sustain motivation? How do you make climate smart farming real and relevant for farmers? How do you enable good quality and relevant context-specific farming advice? And then how do you turn that all into action? And how do you enable farmers to navigate uncertainty? How do they move forward with some confidence about what you are advising or what they might wish to change? So these are the kinds of questions in that DLA that bring forth some of the insights into the farmers and advisory challenges. Underneath all of that, this COPs, how are they working well? And through various surveys and other activities, we find that the COPs are working really well in the sense that advisors are really satisfied with being part of them. They see them as highly relevant. There's a high quality of content in the COPs, and it's helping the COPs and the members of the COPs to understand what climate smart advice actually is and how it might be facilitated. I don't have time to go in this detail, but these are the sort of headline messages. So here we are, a sense in which they are, their confidence in being understood as giving climate smart advice and being a climate smart advisor has increased. They're better able to communicate about climate change, and they're also able to engage with some of the differences of view, the misconceptions or different perspectives on what should be done. And most importantly, they're able to translate those sort of broad agendas into things that farmers understand, like efficiency, animal health, economic gains, and so on. So we're finding, and I don't have a great deal of time to talk about this, so I'll focus on the lessons learned. The COPs functioning, they have to be practical, they have to be well planned, they have to be structured, they have to provide some sort of formal support for the membership of that COP. And there also is providing really good exchange between the groups, enriching all networks. So I think these are some of the sort of really important things we're seeing from COPs. They are really positive. They do have challenges, and some of the ways in which we can address those challenges are set out in these lessons. In terms of what COPs talk about, I mean, Annalie mentioned some of these things also. So there are really good positives about being out in the field. They're member-led, they're co-design, really important, and they're also relevant professionally and providing good sort of development of skills and knowledge and insights. We have some challenges. They can be a little bit abstract sometimes. Perhaps this balance between research and theory is too much, too little. So the lessons learned that we're gaining from this is that COPs need to be relevant. They need to be co-designed with everybody, and that includes farmers. They have to be practical, and they have to balance the science and the sort of practice of farming. And critically, they have to be focused on what farmers need, what farmers experience, and what farmers are telling the COP about their issues and perspectives. I think it's really important that the methods and activities are tailored to what the context. So again, we have lots of really positive insights from the COPs, and we're seeing them as really needing providing interaction, but they need to be more frequent and varied field activities. They need to be really good, simple, practical toolkits. There needs to be good interaction within the COPs and the way that they run, and also need to be slightly better documented, and a bit more continuity is also important for that. Because if we get too much lecture style, heavy, sort of expert heavy and too theory based, then the sort of farming interest and starts to sort of fade away. So out of all of that, we've developed these kind of key principles, which we are sort of developing. These are still formative. We haven't finalized these, but this is what we're seeing from the first wave of our COPs after the first 2 years. So the key principles for advisory success are leading with economic and operational benefits to farmers. Climate smart as a concept is important, but it needs to be translated into something meaningful for farmers. And that's part of seeing it and believing it, being practical about this, giving demonstrations. And again, the links with other European projects like Climate Farm Demo are really important here. Being simple in the sense of simplicity eases adoption, so that people, farmers and others can sort of understand what is being proposed rather than sort of very heavy, complex strategies. A one-off competency, don't assuming that just because it's been shown once that a farmer will adopt it or advisors will understand what is being meant by this tool. So there is this process of developing a layered knowledge to improve competencies, to improve skills and capacities of advisors as they move on to farms. But we also recognize that peers teach peers best. And again, advisors speaking to advisors is really key, but also farmers speaking to farmers is good and an important part of this. Policy markets, they do matter, and they are absolutely essential. So putting all of the advice, climate smart advice, into that context of the farm and the context in which the farm sits is also a really significant part of how COPs can improve their functioning and performance. And then finally, there's a whole raft of discussions being had about how COPs are actually structured and how they perform over time. And then very finally, these are sort of some reflections that I've been sort of developing as a sort of reviewing some of this material. I don't have time to review all of this, but I think a couple I'm just going to pull out are key. The climate smart farming, number 2, is not fixed as a practice. We are learning as a project. Advisors are always learning, farmers are always learning, and it's understanding whatever you do in these sort of advisory capacities, whether you're running a COP, a living lab, a lighthouse, or some other learning structure, that is the absolute key. It doesn't have to be a COP, but it does have to be underpinned by a commitment to learning. both on the advisors' part, as well as engaging in co-designing, co-creating with farmers as part of that learning process. And as Annalie was mentioning, one of the 9 and 10 is building that trust with farmers is absolutely key. And developing those softer skills, those sort of personal, social skills is really important, because you may have all the very good technical advice, but until that is actually engaged with a farmer and the farmer becomes engaged with you and trusts you, then that technical knowledge will always stay on the shelf to some extent. So monitoring and evaluation is not we're not checking up, we're not trying to be telling people that they've done something wrong. What we're trying to do is learn. And that really underpins the whole of this project and our approach to COPs and our approach to climate smart advisory practices. Thank you.
Thank you. Ante?
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I guess people could have a question, where can I get all of this information Kevin just talked about, and
Sure.
Liz, I guess you will tell about it just in a second.
Yeah.
So thank you, Kevin.
That's okay. I'll let Liz
Yeah, a little bit. So I already started a little bit with this, and I hope you have seen some opportunities and have seen some things that you are interested by. So to remind you what we have to offer for you as advisors. So I mentioned this at the beginning, that there will be opportunities for capacity building through this extensive peer-to-peer exchange. Laura mentioned that there will be 260 communities of practice. We had a first group of 40 ending now, meaning that there are still 220 COPs to take place in the next 4.5 years. So if you're interested, there are opportunities. And besides the COP, there are also activities taking place within your country, opportunities to connect to your network of farmers, other advisors, and other local actors outside of these communities of practice. I will explain that. So there is training. Opportunities are now mostly online through the thematic knowledge exchange. There will also be more live opportunities a little bit later in the project, national training. So that will come. That is not happening just as yet, but it will come. So now it's mostly online. And I will also show you briefly the repository. So if we triggered your interest a little bit and you want to discover more, you can always reach out to the national coordinator in your country. So if you go to our website, under the people section, there is a list of national coordinators. So you can find the national coordinator for your country and his or her contact information. You can, as Laura already mentioned, learn more about the communities of practice in your country and across the EU. Again, through our website, there is under resources, there is the full list of communities of practice, and you can filter and find more information. And again, also the coach with their contact information if you are interested. We also invite you to visit the Farm Demo YouTube channel, where we have a playlist of all the thematic knowledge exchange events so far. So if you go to YouTube and find the Farm Demo channel and look for playlists, there is the list of webinars that we already had. So I think we are now at 26, if I'm correct, across these 12 thematic areas that we mentioned before. And of course, you can already visit our Farming for Climate platform, which is currently active, but which is still very much also at the same time under development. So it's a separate web platform. The idea is that there will be more information to come, but for the moment, we have already a first subset of dedicated advisory tools and methods available for you. And there is also an overview of climate and carbon assessment tools provided through our sister project, Climate Farm Demo. More information to come will be on mitigation and adaptation practices, quite importantly, but we will also work on dedicated training modules, and of course also insights from the dynamic learning agenda that Kevin mentioned will also be disseminated through this platform. So more to follow later but already available now. So those are opportunities to discover more. If you are interested, you can also get involved. So if you scan the QR code, you will be directed to a very short Microsoft Forms where you can indicate your direct interest, either to be contacted for taking part in a community of practice, to be invited for thematic knowledge exchanges and live trainings once they start happening, and also, of course, to receive our newsletter. And we, of course, also invite you to engage with our social media channels and stay up to date with our project through them. So I think that was all from my side at this point. So I want to thank you also to the team of EUFRAS for giving us the opportunity to present our project. And thank you to everyone in the audience for joining us.
Yes, and thank you all for presenting. I think it was really interesting, and in the chat you can find a lot of links shared by Isidora, so links connected to the project and the possibilities to connect yourself to the project. And yeah, it's really nice to see that in fact none of the participants has left the event. so it was interesting for you, which is the joy for me. So thank you all, and let's see you in the next coffee break.